Hi everyone, welcome to the November 19th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Milkowski, and this week we're taking a look at the late pick 5 sequence on Saturday at Aqueduct. And Aqueduct at this time of year can draw some pretty fun fields of horses trying to squeeze in a turf start at the end of the season, some interesting 2-year-old races before some barns ship down to Florida. They debut their 2-year-olds at Aqueduct, and I think that's the kind of card that we have on Saturday. Just a really interesting set of races throughout the day, and especially in the last half of this card, the late pick 5 sequence, Craig. The feature race is the Grade 2 Red Smith, which drew a nice field, but none of the races in this sequence are that easy. It's a complicated affair to get through.
Yeah, it is. I went through this looking for some races I could go pretty narrow. Maybe I came up with one, but it is a tough sequence. There's some horses I like that are prices that I will definitely be keying on in some vertical bets. So fun races to talk about for sure.
Yeah, we've got a couple of 2-year-old maiden races in the sequence, the 7th and the 10th. Not the first leg, so we won't quite get to see how the board is playing in those races, which always makes it a little bit tough. But let's start things off, Craig, with the first race in this pick 5 sequence. Race 6, it is an allowance race. Optional claiming 80,000, nominators of 2 other than is the allowance condition, going 6 furlongs for the older horses on the dirt. And one of the smaller fields in the sequence with 7 runners signed on. The clear horse to beat, I would say, is the number 2 Cost Basis. He's just kept some really good company through the summer and into the fall, and he's coming off a narrow loss at this level. I guess you could say maybe he's not the most convincing winning type, but it's possible that he's just found the right field.
Yeah, this is the one race that I think I was able to narrow down pretty well, and it's because of cost basis. It would be tough for me to go too heavily against him in this spot. He seems like much the most likely winner. Our pace projector shows it's a race that's going to favor horses on or near the lead, and he's the horse on the lead. And also the horse that's shown alongside of him with a big gap to third is the 5-horse Mr. Phil. And he's a horse who his last couple races seems to have lost some of that early speed. So if we were only to focus on the last few, cost basis would be shown all up front all by himself. So I think he is clearly the horse to beat. I mean, I guess there's a couple others if you wanted to look for maybe C-type horses. For me, I have to love the old veteran T Loves a Fight. He always seems to show up, run his race. He's taken a pretty big drop in class, turning back to 6 furlongs, which I think he prefers these shorter kind of sprint races. So maybe he'd want to IBUs a lot less lately. But for me, it's going to come down to betting. Luckily, we can see the odds if cost basis is 3-5 or 4-5 in here. That's not the kind of horse I want to start a pick 5 with, and I'd likely just go on to a pick 4.
Yeah, for me, it's not that different. I wouldn't say that I'm against cost basis. The pace situation is likely to be in his favor, as you noted. Only he and Mr. Phil really have that kind of tactical speed to allow them to be forward. I mean, cost basis is shown on the lead in the pace projector. I don't believe he's actually ever run that way. He did share the lead last time at Belmont when he was basically dueling with winner Newbaum the entire way, and that runner just kind of fended him off in the stretch. Again, I wouldn't say that cost basis is necessarily a winning type. I don't love the Chad Brown trainees that kind of get stuck at one allowance condition and never break through. And this will be his 6th attempt to break through this non-N2X condition. That said, he's got speed figures that just are higher than his foes in here. He ran against horses like Bo Liam and eventual Breeders' Cup Sprint winner Aloha West over the summer. So can't really fault him for not winning those races. Just think he makes a lot of sense. Though there is one other horse that does interest me quite a bit, and that's the number 3 Drafted. And I really wanted to give a strong push to Drafted in this race, but I'm just a little bit wary of the pace situation because he is a one-run closer. I liked his effort too back when he faced off against Cost Basis, T Loves a Fight, and some others in that October 1st race at this level, because if you watch that race, he was towards the back of the pack early. The pace was not particularly fast. He clearly had a ton of run coming into the stretch, but he just got into a ton of trouble. Dylan Davis could never find a clear path for him. He was stymied in traffic for a good 1/8 of a mile from the quarter pole to the 8th pole. He finally got out and he just missed 3rd. He was making a good late run in that race, but just got rolling too late. After that, he was again against a slow pace when he ran in the Bold Ruler against the tougher field. Wonder where Craig is, just a much better horse than what he's facing here. So I think Drafted's overall form is kind of dirtied up. I just am scared that he's going to find himself in another paceless situation. So I think in some ways drafted is as good as cost basis. I just think cost basis is going to get the better trip. So I might put drafted on top, but I would use both of these horses probably in similar strength. And I guess I could throw in Mr. Phil as a backup, but there are some reasons to think that he hasn't had the right trips in his recent races. I do think he's better when he's forwardly placed, and maybe Jose Ortiz getting back aboard him will ride him that way, because Jose was aboard when he had his best luck going back to the summer and spring. So I think that rider switch could be important for Mr. Phil, but they were the only three that I could really make a case for here, Craig. The others, they're just a little bit hard for me to get to. T loves a fight. I think he's lost 26 straight races, so he really hasn't won in a long time. And the outside horse, Spun and Won, when you first look at this race, he might be a new face that you might get kind of interested in, because some of these familiar options, you might get a little sick of them. But I just wonder if Spun and Won can bring that Parks form to Naira.
Yeah, I hear you. T Loves a Fight hasn't lost that many. He won one last year back at Belmont in October. On my anniversary, so I'm not sure. I just was happened to be scrolling through that because it surprised me when you said that. Totally agree about drafted. I wanted to find a way to use him. He's a horse, like you said, who he just never seems to find a race with pace. It's almost unbelievable how many blue fractions he's had since he has returned from overseas at Maidan and in Saudi. But he just can't seem to find any pace, so it was hard for me to latch on to him. But and maybe if it was 7 furlongs, I wouldn't hold it against him so much. But the 6 is just a little too much for me.
Let's move on to the next race in this Pick 5 sequence, and it definitely gets more difficult here as we move on to one of those 2-year-old maiden races. This one's for Open Company, going 7 furlongs on the main track. A lot of horses that already have experience. Many of them just have one start under their belts, but some promising sorts in this race, Craig. I think the main players are coming out of a couple of different races. Iconic Adventure, who's drawn down towards the inside. He was second to another experienced runner, Hagler, last time when he made his debut, but this Bill Mott trainee did make a good late run to finish second in that race. And some people also might take a look at that race won by the Chad Brown trained Zandon, which Matt Doyle and Sky and Sand come out of. They were second and third respectively. I think all of these horses have shown some ability and have the right to improve, but there's a lot going on in this race.
There is, and the racing secretary didn't do us any favors. It would have been nice if they maybe flip-flop races 6 and 7, so you could see the betting with several first-time starters in here. But at least we can check the double Will Pays, kind of see who's maybe live in there. But it's a tough race. The horses you mentioned coming out of that Hagler race, both look like they're contenders. An Iconic Adventure and even Dad's Good Runner. Matt Doyle, the 3-horse, he ran fine his first time out. I don't want to overlook him. His first running line looked dull, but it's been a strong, productive race. And he came back, ran a nice 94 speed figure. The 9-horse Piccadilly for Shug McGahee. He took some money first out, comes back second time, which is usually a better move for Shug. Same for the 10, Steve Asmussen's horse, Sky and Sand, who ran a nice 94 speed figure second time out, when third in that race won by Zandon, finishing just a half length behind Matt Doyle. But believe it or not, the horse that I've actually am leaning to, with one of the price horses I alluded to at the beginning, is drawn pretty far outside, and that's the 11 horse, Life is Great. He's a horse who was just kind of plodding along, running okay, and then I really liked his last race. He was third, beaten 7 lengths, going a mile and a 16th, but he jumped up his speed figure 21 points to a 98, and I don't see any reason to think that was a fluke. I think that was a really strong maiden race. The runbacks from that race have come back well. And I just really like the turn back for him. So I think this is a race where I'm going to spread, but as a vertical player, I'm going to really key in on Life is Great.
Yeah, Life is Great is a horse that I really don't know what to do with in here. I have to say I was a little bit perplexed that he was even 13-1 in that last race, because that looked like a really tough field. And frankly, I hated his sprint form prior to that. I know that he had just missed in a couple races, but I mean, the race that he was coming out of his debut, I mean, you could see Labarde is also in this race. He just hasn't panned out. I know that Hayot came out of that race to win the Saratoga Special, but he obviously improved a lot in his second start. And I thought that Life is Great was just in an awful maiden field two back when he lost by a head. The speed figures show that he had never run higher than an 80, and then suddenly he jumps up to that 98 Timeform US speed figure last time, going a mile and a 16th. Maybe he just always wanted to go long. I don't know. That was a weird day at Belmont where it seemed like some horses that kind of got shuffled back or were towards the back of the pack early just ended up getting distanced and losing by 20 and 30 lengths. And some of the horses that did come back to run better out of that race had those kinds of trips. I wonder if Life is Great just got carried a little bit by the track profile. I mean, he's going to be, I think, a decent price once again because these are connections that don't always get bet. That's why I made him 12-1 on the morning line, despite that high speed figure last time. I just don't quite trust that last race. It was a weird day to me, and I want to see him do it again. But again, he could be a decent price here, so I don't want to be too dismissive of him. There are some other horses in this race that I think are interesting at prices, but I mean, just to kind of finish up those second-time starters, the one that I would be most encouraged by taking another step forward is the number 2 Iconic Adventure. It's kind of a tale of two different races here with that Zandon race and the Hagler race, because the Hagler race featured a fast pace and Iconic Adventure closed into it. And the Zandon race finished a slow pace, and a horse like Sky and Sand was right up on that slow pace and faded a bit at the end. So they both kind of had pace situations in their favor, but I feel like I'm a little bit more optimistic that Iconic Adventure is going to take the step forward because he was running on well at the end, and if you watch the gallop out, he went right past the winner. Looked like Junior Alvarado was even niggling him a bit past the wire just to kind of give this horse a good experience, finish off the race, keep going to the clubhouse turn. I always like that when it seems like the instructions are maybe this one needs a race, give him a good gallop out, and maybe he'll be fitter next time. And when you look at Bill Mott's stats for horses like this, it does kind of fit that pattern, because if you look in Formulator, maiden second-time starters, specifically in 7 furlong races on the dirt, Bill Mott is 10 for 28, winning at 36% with an ROI of $3.72. So he finds these 7 furlong races for, I think, the horses that are really well meant. And Iconic Adventure just seems like one of these Godolphin homebreds that might actually be pretty good, but he's got to take a step forward. And I think he's going to vie for favoritism, but he's just the one that I trust the most to take that step forward. I also am somewhat interested at a bigger price in Bill Mott's other horse, the number 5 Ansel. He's only run on the turf so far. He's got, though, kind of an ambiguous pedigree. The Blames tend to run on anything. The Dams by Midnight Lude, it's not really a confirmed turf pedigree. And I know that they put this horse right on the turf, and he's kind of just run the same race every time in different company, different pace situations and distances, but ever since the summer at Saratoga, I watch a lot of workouts when I have to assess these first-time starters, and I kept noticing this horse in the morning just outworking everything that he's put with on the dirt. And I don't know why they ran him on the turf. Maybe because he's a son of Blame. He's got kind of this high striding action that looks like a turf horse, but he has worked really well on the dirt. So I think it's interesting that they're finally switching him over. And I wonder if maybe he's just one of these Bill Mott horses that maybe they misjudged a little bit. It wouldn't be the first time for the Bill Mott barn to have that happen to them. But he's interesting here, and I do think he's going to be a bit of a price. But Craig, there are many other places to go. I know you mentioned the number 9 Piccadilly, the number 8 Dad's Good Runner. They're also candidates to take steps forward second time out. So this is one where you could potentially use a lot of horses.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the 5, because I was going to ask you. He was one of the 2 horses I specifically wanted to ask you about in Ansel because of that. I know you watch a lot of the workouts, so good info there. And the other one, I find it kind of odd. We haven't mentioned the Todd Pletcher first-time starter. What have you seen from him in the morning? I assume it's not great based on the 6-1 morning line.
Well, it's a weird situation. This Todd Pletcher-Rapoli combo, they're both first-time starters, though one of them stuck on the also eligible list. I believe in these situations when a trainer has runners for the same barn at NYRA, you have to, when you enter the horse, declare a preference about which one gets into the main body of the field. So I guess that they're a little bit higher on Never Change than they are Outperform, which I'm not sure that I necessarily would have seen that in the workouts. I mean, I watched one of Never Change's workouts on XBTV. It seemed like he was just slightly second best back in the middle of October to a horse named Beyond Best, who debuted recently and finished fifth in a mile in the 16th race at Belmont on the dirt. That was a filly that I thought was going to run better than she did, so maybe that makes me downgrade Never Change a little bit. Although I think the story of both of these horses is they're debuting 7 furlongs because they probably want to go longer. Never Change is out of a damn Danette, who you might remember, I think she was a Keith DeSormo trainee who was just a maiden for a long time that they ran at a bunch of stakes races. I think she ran at the Kentucky Oaks. She was grade 1 placed at one point, but she wanted to go longer and outperform the one that stuck on the AE list. He is a son of gun runner, but this dam side, the dam's by Street Cry. It's the family of Zenyatta, so this one probably wants to go farther as well. It just feels like maybe these are two horses that haven't shown a lot in the mornings that are going to do better with added ground. Let's, Craig, if there was nobody else that you really wanted to mention in this race, I think that we can move on to the 8th race, which, again, it's pretty complicated. It's a race that I had a tough time making the morning line. It's a non-winners one allowance race going 6 furlongs on the turf. I think I went back and forth a few times before I hit the submit button about who should be the morning line favorite in this race. I settled on Colton's Command because even though I don't quite understand it, it seems like the public has a bit of a love affair with this horse. He was favored last time, and I didn't really see that coming. He's been knocking on the door at this level, and he's got a nice late run to him. Just seems like Colton's Command is often at the mercy of pace, and maybe he's going to get some to close into here, but I kind of preferred others, and if he was going to be a short price once again, I wanted to look at some alternatives.
Yeah, it's a field of 10 and unusual in a sprint. No flag on the pace projector, which says there's not a lot of speed. And since you already mentioned Colton's Command, I'll start with him. I'm just not a fan of his. It's a race that's pretty even. There's a lot of horses that run in right around the 100 mark, and he's one of them consistently. But there's others in the field that are just consistently a little bit faster than him. So I'm not going to use Colton's Command at all. I kind of narrowed it down to the horses that are more those mid-100 type horses, and that was the 6 through the 9 horses. Call Me Harry, Scuttlebuzz, Ring of Fire, and Bust and Shout. And the one I prefer most of those is Scuttlebuzz. I think he's a horse who, he lost to Colton's Command last time, but I think for him you can put a line through that. He had trouble at the start and just dropped right back to last, which in a race which we have coded in all blue fractions gives him absolutely no chance. I like the more outside post draw for him here. I do think he's going to get some pace to run into, and I think his race 2 back is one that would win this spot. So I like the 9-2 morning line, and he would be the horse that would be my A.
Yeah, there are, I think, 2 horses that I wanted the most in this race, and one of them is Scuttlebuzz. He is the kind of horse that needs a little bit of pace to close into. I don't think he has to be as far back as he was last time. If you watch the Horses to Watch segment that I do on DRF's YouTube channel, you know that I was not pleased with the ride this horse got in his last race. He did break a little bit slowly, but I'm not sure what kind of plan Jose Lezcano had hatched, because the comment is anchored, and that is what happened. I mean, he could not have had a harder hold on this horse. He was not allowing him to run forward when it seemed like Scuttlebuzz wanted to show a little bit more speed than he did. And obviously, as you can see from those pace figures, that was not going to be a winning strategy in that particular race, given the way they were crawling up front. So I think if Scuttlebuzz gets back to the race he ran 2 back, going this 6 furlong distance, when he actually beat today's rival, Call Me Harry, that makes Scuttlebuzz very dangerous here, and he's been successful at Aqueduct before. So I do like Scuttlebuzz. He'd probably be my top pick in this race. But the other horse, Craig, that I'm interested in, that I wanted to get your take on, is the number 2, Kawaimea River. Another one that I think didn't get the best ride last time. He had shown some ability when he broke his maiden 2 back, got a decent trip that day, but he put away a good horse in Advise and Consent, who came right back to win a tougher spot, going longer for Chad Brown. So I think that validated the form of his maiden win, and they put him right in stakes company last time. And he didn't break that sharply, but once again, I don't want to be too hard on Jose Lezcano, but I don't know why this horse was so far off the pace when he hadn't shown that kind of running style in any of his prior starts. And that was a race that was just dominated on the front end. Actually, Kendrick Carmouche, who was riding the winner, Rustler, just kind of stole it on a 20-1 shot. Kawaimia River did run well. He was wide the entire way, made up some ground. I think he's better than that result indicates. And I like him turning back to 6 furlongs. And if he can revert to that more forward running style, I think he's a major player to win this race as well.
Yeah, he's the horse I had listed last that I said's a real head scratcher for me. I don't love the post position because I do think some horses are going to outbreak him, and I worry a little bit that he's going to get shuffled back. But that race 2 back, he has the speed figure to win in here. He ran a 106, and even last time he ran a 103. That was against straight 3-year-olds, that stake race, so I would say it's probably about the same level as this race. But he certainly has the credentials to win. I think it's just going to come down to trip. And it could just depend how the pace develops in here. Bust and Shout's a bit of a wild card. We have him shown on the front end, and rightfully so. That's how he does his best running. He's been working well, but he is coming off of a really long layoff. And the other horse we have shown up near the front is like 1,000,000 to 1 on the morning line. Hasn't been on the turf in a while, and probably isn't a serious contender. So if Kawaimia River can tuck in behind those two, not drop too far back, I do think he is a major player.
Yeah, we haven't really mentioned Call Me Harry that much as another horse that I think could take some money in this race. He did beat Dancing Buck last time, and that horse just came back to win yesterday at Aqueduct as we're recording this on Friday. And Call Me Harry, he's got those speed figures to be competitive here. He's just moving up to this Open Company N1X level out of those New York bred and 2X races. So he's going to have to transfer that form. I also think Call Me Harry's gotten great trips in his last couple of starts. He's been forward. He was on the rail 2 back in a race where Scuttlebuzz carried a bit more ground, and then last time up on a slow pace. So I wonder if Call Me Harry is going to get that another good trip up close to the pace if, there's a little more speed signed on this time. And the horse that you mentioned, Craig, the number 9, Bust and Shout, I just think he's a little bit naturally faster than Call Me Harry. And, I don't think Bust and Shout is impossible in this race. I've got him at 8-1 on the morning line. He definitely has races to win this. It's just Bruce Levine really does not have great numbers off layoffs of this kind. So I'm a little bit skeptical he's going to come with his A race, but look, he'll be at price, so he's definitely one that I would not completely count out.
Yeah, he's the one our pace projector points to. I think he's even the top power pick in TimeformUS. He'd be more a C-type for me, but yeah, I'm not going to get knocked out of this race if he wins.
Let's move on to the stakes portion of this sequence, the featured 9th race. It is the Grade 2 Red Smith going 1 3/8 on the inner turf course, and I believe this race was upgraded for this year from a Grade 3 to a Grade 2, and can't argue with that given the field that's been drawn here because some good horses in this race. It's really deep and competitive. A lot of horses with graded stakes experience, like Channel Cat, who actually won a Grade 1 earlier this year in the Man of War. Though I do think the horse that's probably going to go favored, Craig, is the number 4, Serve the King, who just seems like one of these Chad Brown horses that didn't come around early at the beginning of his career, but slowly but surely he's been improving and just seems like he's really found himself since stretching out to these marathon distances. There's not too much to knock about the race he ran last time behind Rock Emperor in the Joe Hirsch.
No, I think this is a strong race, and as you said, it looks super competitive. And one of the things I did, I tried to eliminate some of the noise. I think there's some horses in here who may take some money, who probably just aren't good enough to win. I'd say Soldier Rising is one of them. He's only 5-1 on your morning line. He's just a 3-year-old stepping up against older. And on turf, I always think that's a tough spot. And he really doesn't have the speed figures to be competitive, in my opinion. He's yet to hit the 120 mark, so I'm trying to focus on the horses that I think can run 120 or better, and that's actually not as many as you'd think. I only came up with 4 of them. Obviously, Serve the King is the first one. He's run 2 120s his last time, a couple times out. He won that John's Call at 1 5/8 at Saratoga with a nice 121 figure. Backed it up in the Hirsch with a 123 when second the Rock Emperor. So I've got no knocks on Serve the King at all. I'm definitely going to use him. A horse I think that could be dangerous is Channel Cat, the old wily veteran. He's a horse who's very likely going to be on the lead in here. I guess the main horse who could challenge him is Tide of the Sea. That didn't work out so well for him last time, so I'm not sure that would be their strategy. And Channel Cat's proven when he's left alone up front, he can run some fast races, and I think that might be the case here. So I'm definitely going to be using him. A couple others, Price Talk is drawn outside, but he was first time off the claim for Anthony Dutrow last time. Jumped up his speed figure to a 120. It could easily be argued he had a great pace set up that day, and he did. It was fast fractions, mostly coded and read by us. He came from off the pace. But when you look at the chart of that race, I don't think there's anything fluky about it. It's not like the race totally fell apart. Some horses who were up pretty close to the pace finished decent here, ran second and fourth, I believe. So I think that improvement's legitimate and not just a function of the pace, and he's going to be a price. So I'll definitely be using Price Talk. And one of the real bombs that I like in here is the 8 Sanctuary City, a horse you have 20-1 on the morning line. And I'm not doubting that at all, but he's a 4-year-old who's still pretty lightly raced and just seems to be getting better and better every time. And I really liked this race last time in that New York bred Mohawk Stakes behind Some Like It Hot Brown. It was a slow pace where Some Like It Hot Brown had everything his own way, clear, easy lead. And Sanctuary City almost came and got him. So I don't think there was anything fluky about the 121 he ran that day. So he's definitely going to be on my tickets and a horse I use prominently in vertical bets.
Yeah, it's a very competitive race, and I don't really disagree with anything you said about the two horses that I do believe will be the shortest prices here, Serve the King and Channel Cat. They're both obviously major players. Serve the King, I mean, I get why he's improved going these longer distances. He's just a kind of a one-paced horse. He really does not have much of a turn of foot, so those types typically are not successful going the mile and the 16th distances, but his grinding style has worked better as they've gone longer, and he did just kind of do that last time at the Turf Classic. He never looked like he was going to win that race, but he just kind of kept grinding away, and he eventually got into second. No match for his stablemate winner, Rock Emperor, but he did finish ahead of some good horses like Gufo and Channel Maker who were in behind him, and horses that came back and actually ran pretty well in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Also Japan, who I believe was fourth in the Breeders' Cup Turf out of that Turf Classic. So Serve the King's form lines, they definitely hold up to scrutiny, and he probably is the horse to beat. I mean, Channel Cat, rather, the likely speed in this race. I guess you just have to wonder if maybe he's lost a step since early in the year, because his last couple races, they do leave something to be desired. He obviously did not get the right pace set up in the Bowling Green 2 back when maybe he went a little bit too quick up front over a demanding course and paid the price. I did not like his effort at all at Kentucky Downs last time, but again, while there are no pace figures listed, if you watch that race, it just looked like the kind of race that flowed more towards closers. There was a bunch of horses sharing the lead in the early going, and they all kind of fell apart. I wish Channel Cat had put up more of a fight, because he typically digs in a little bit more than he did that day. But I think you can make some excuses for him. So he definitely makes a lot of sense, and you know that he likes this mile and 3/8 distance. I do want to look at some other alternatives, though. Some people might go to Soldier Rising. I know you just kind of dismissed him, Craig, on the speed figures, and I get that. He probably does have to run faster to beat this field, but I mean, people who look at his form lines, they might like his two races that started off his U.S. campaign this year, because he was beaten by State of Rest in the Saratoga Derby, and then Yabir in the Jockey Club Derby, and State of Rest came out of that race to win the Cox Plate in Australia, one of the biggest races in that part of the world, and Yabir obviously came right back to win the Breeders' Cup Turf. So, I mean, those form lines really do stand up. I wouldn't say that Soldier Rising was really any match for either of those winners in those races, but I guess there are some reasons to believe that Soldier Rising maybe is a better horse than those running lines would indicate, and it is kind of a vote of confidence that Christophe Clement is running this 3-year-old against older horses trying to get a longer distance at the end of the year. So I'm not necessarily picking Soldier Rising, but I don't want to completely dismiss him in this race, because I think there are some things to like about him. I'm very interested in one of the horses you mentioned, Craig, who does have the speed figure credentials, and that's the number 10 Price Talk. I'm not 100% sure that he wants to go this far, but this horse has always been a little bit underrated, I think, even by his prior connections. I still can't fathom why they dropped him in for that $50,000 tag at Saratoga, because he just seemed like a horse that had way more potential than that, even though he is a gelding. He had run well in all of his races, and his one poor effort back at Belmont in June, he frankly did not get the best ride. So since then, he's won 2 in a row. I really liked his effort last time. Sure, he did get a nice pace set up to close into, but he still ran a strong speed figure to win that race. It's proven to be a good race coming back. His flop shot basically repeated his number next time, and Shamrocket came back to win a stakes race. And as for the distance, I mean, the Kitten's Joys, they can run all day. And on the dam side, Price Talk's Dam is a half-sister to a horse that won the San Juan Capistrano, going 1 3/4 miles. So there is stamina in this pedigree, and I think he's one that could get somewhat overlooked here, and he's got the tactical speed to be forward in a race where Channel Cat might be controlling on the front end. So I like Price Talk a little bit in this race. And the one other horse I want to mention at a price before I throw it back to you, Craig, is the number 6 Corelli. One that I think if you take out the races where there's significant give in the ground and he's running over firm courses, his form actually looks a lot better. He's a horse that does not run well when there's a lot of give in the ground. Jonathan Thomas has said this. And he actually ran deceptively well in the Knickerbocker last time because he was given way too much to do by his rider and made a big late run in that race to get up for 4th. And I think the stretch out's going to help him as well. So he's one at a price that I think might be able to get into the mix.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting race from my perspective for pick 5 implications, because I like some price horses, the couple we talked about, and I like the 2 horses that are favored. And I think I give them all kind of about the same chance. I wouldn't want us to weight them differently. I'd probably use them all in the same increment. So it's one I'm going to have to really get creative and try to come up with a ticket with and figure out how I want to play it. Soldier Rising, I totally get your argument here. I was actually against him for the reasons you mentioned. That's his company lines. Even though he ran second to some horses who went on to do much bigger and greater things, I just have a feeling people are going to overvalue that because he was second, but I think despite being beaten only a length and 2.5 lengths, he really wasn't near as good as those 2 winners.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm kind of on the same page as you with Soldier Rising. I just wanted to articulate why people might like him in this race and why I made him 5-1 in the morning line. I think people are going to see that Yabir running line, even though I thought he was no match for Yabir in that race. I get why some people might go in that direction. It's not the direction that I'm personally going because I'd rather take some bigger prices that I can make a more creative case for. But I certainly am not going to be shocked when he runs well. Just from a value standpoint, I wasn't sure that Soldier Rising was where I wanted to land in this race. Let's move on to the final race in this sequence, race 10. It's another one of these 2-year-old maiden races. This one's for the New York breds going 6 furlongs. And I think you can go one of 2 ways in this race, Craig, because it's been pretty difficult to get through the sequence up until this point, and you might get to this last race and just be like, all right, I've already used a bunch of horses on my ticket. I'm just going to not get too creative here and really anchor this around Catching Cupid, who seems like the most likely winner, a solid favorite. Is that how you're going to look at it, or are you going to try to get a little bit more creative in this one?
Yeah, it's really tough to say till I sit down with the ticket maker. For this race in particular, I think 4 of the horses are AEs on Friday, and another horse is also entered in a similar race. I forget exactly how the rules work on that one, where they're going to show up. So I would imagine most of this field's going to stay together. I do want to hear your thoughts on the 6 horse, who I saw you had only 8-1 on the morning line, a first-time starter, who comes in with some really low-profile connections in trainer Cleveland Johnson, who I remember for a long time ago as kind of the fill-in trainer for Rick Dutchrow, and Jalen Samuels, the rider, just a 3%er. So that one kind of caught my eye. But yeah, clearly the horse to beat is the one horse, Catching Cupid, as you say. And it just depends how I can kind of narrow down the ticket. I do think there's plenty of speed in this spot. What should help his cause, drawing inside should gap the field out a little bit. But some of those speed horses do interest me a little bit. Clash AJ is the horse who ran pretty decently first time out, then just got caught in a really fast pace that completely disintegrated last time. So if you put a line through that race, I do think he's dangerous. The 8-horse Hot Rod Rumble showed some pretty good speed second out after running a good second first time out. I mean, it certainly wouldn't shock me if he were able to win. And even the outside horse, the 10, has shown some good speed last time, tracking what was a pretty fast pace. But I don't particularly love any of those horses. I mean, it wouldn't shock. Maybe I would use the 3 just because of his price as a Seahorse / AJ, because I do think he has an excuse last time. If I was going to use a horse more as a B type behind Catching Cupid, it would probably be the shipper from Parks, Caveman. I thought he ran deceptively well despite having just a 73 speed figure. He kind of floated out wide the entire race, and he was running right with the winner through the stretch. He couldn't make up any ground, but he wasn't losing any. So if I was looking for another price horse, it would be Caveman.
I have to say, as a horse player, I do enjoy the name Caveman. That's a pretty good one. But I wouldn't say that I love the horse in this particular race. Catching Cupid, he's a tough one because he almost looks like a mirage in a desert. Like, I mean, or I should say an oasis. I mean, at the end of this sequence, you're just slogging through it, trying to narrow it down, and he just looks like the clear horse to beat in this last race when you first take a look at it. But as I dig a little deeper, I can poke some holes in Catching Cupid. That race last time, it came up surprisingly fast. That was one of the rare days late in the Belmont meet when it seemed like there really was a significant rail bias. The winner, Kenner, kind of ran a gigantic speed figure out of nowhere, riding the rail the entire way. A big favorite who got carried very wide, asymmetric, just really did not run his race there. And Catching Cupid, he was the other horse that rode the rail at 17-1, a first-time starter, that just kind of followed the winner the entire way. And I feel like Catching Cupid, while that 91 TimeformUS speed figure makes him way the horse to beat, I wonder that it was a little bit exaggerated by the track profile that day. And I'm just not sure that he's quite as good as he might look at first glance. And there are some interesting horses in this race. And you mentioned one of them, Craig, the number 6, Always Charming. Now, I've not seen any of this horse's workouts. I'll say that right off the bat. I really do not have a big story on this horse, but those drills that you see, I mean, those are some fast times in the morning for a trainer, Cleveland Johnson, that if you haven't been paying attention, he's gotten a small string of 2-year-olds this year, and he has definitely outperformed expectations with the ones that he's run so far. He's hit the board with a few of them at gigantic prices. He sent out a winner at 60-something to 1 a few weeks ago at Belmont to win on the turf with Jalon Samuel aboard. He's just a trainer that can do a good job when he gets the horses, and it seems like he's gotten a good crop of horses from this owner this year. And Always Charming, he's got pedigree to win early. Central Banker has good stats with young horses. The Dam, she was a good turf sprinter, but she's a half-sister to Saturday Appeal, who I think won $200,000 or $300,000 as a New York bred on this circuit. He was a good runner from 6 furlongs out to a mile. So there's real pedigree for Always Charming to be okay. And based on the workouts, I think that this one, he could be interesting and sort of fly under the radar in this race. The other horse that interests me quite a bit at a big price, Craig, is the number 7, Unique Unions. It's worth going back and watching this horse's debut. I don't know exactly what happened. He was vanned off that day, but this horse easily ran up to take the early lead in the first eighth of a mile, and then you could see very quickly Jose Lezcano felt like something wasn't right, and he thought about pulling this horse up maybe a furlong into the race. Then he let him run maybe another quarter mile, and then he decided, okay, I've got to pull this horse up. Something's not right. But this horse was showing a ton of speed at the time that basically his rider almost pulled the plug. So I know he was a big price that day, but he essentially outran Hot Rod Rumble to the front end before something went amiss. But the fact that he's coming back in just a month, I think it means that whatever was ailing him first time out, they've quickly resolved. So I would expect him to show that same speed once again. And if he can go a little bit farther and actually run a full race this day, I'm intrigued to see what he can do. And I think he's one that people might really just not latch on to here or go back and watch that debut, seeing that he was just eased. So he's a horse at a huge price that I think might be able to get into the mix.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought him up because I did want to mention him because obviously whatever went wrong, I would assume has been straightened out because of that string of workouts you mentioned. He's worked out several times since, a couple of them pretty quick. So worth watching that replay. I did watch it this morning and didn't even realize it was him at first. I was watching it for Hot Rod Rumble, and yeah, it was pretty eye-catching speed before he dropped out of it. So not a whole lot to add for this race for me. I guess we can jump into the recap at this point, unless you had more on this race.
No, those are the horses that I was interested in. It's just I just kind of wanted to highlight there are things going on in that race where you don't just have to rely on that favorite. I mean, I guess if you need to single, Catching Cupid is a place that you might want to single, but for me, I wanted to find some alternatives in that race. And Craig, this is the kind of sequence where I would be playing it to try to beat some favorites. Maybe not cost basis so much in the first race because he's not a horse that I want to chuck completely. I do want to use him. But in the last race, I'm going to maybe downgrade Catching Cupid a little bit because this is the kind of sequence that's really going to pay well if you can beat a horse like Catching Cupid, which I think the majority of tickets are going to be going through in that last leg.
Yeah, I can see that because this is a sequence that I think is going to pay more than some of the ones we've talked about lately. And I think you actually nailed it when you said he might be a bit of a mirage because I had similar feelings. While I think he is a contender in here, he's probably not as strong as he looks on paper due to that last race. And there are some price alternatives. You mentioned Unique Unions, always charming. I like Class AJ a bit in here. Just because of his really strong pace figures that he's run. And if he was able to break well and get loose, I think he could do some damage. So this is a sequence I'm looking forward to. And as I mentioned early on, you're not committed to play a pick 5. You can play the pick 4 if you really don't know what to do with cost basis or don't want to start out a pick 5 with a 4-5 shot.
Yeah, just to briefly go through it, I still have to play around with some things in Ticketmaker to make this work from a price standpoint, but I'll just kind of go through what my thoughts are. In the first leg, it's one of the actually more difficult legs, despite just having these 7 runners, because sorting these out in an ABC method or knowing which horses to press and which to downgrade a little bit, it's tough when you got a favorite like cost basis. I would use him probably as my A and maybe draft it as a B with Mr. Phil as a C. In the 7th race, I would key on Iconic Adventure as the only A, and I would use horses like Ansel at a price as a B, maybe even a little bit of Matt Doyle. I think Piccadilly is interesting for Shug McGahee to take a step forward. He's a B that I would use. Anybody else, I'd probably downgrade to a C. In the 8th race, I would want to focus on Kawaimia River and Scuttlebuzz, the 2 and the 7, as my only A's in that race, and I'd use some of those others we talked about as backups in there. The Red Smith, for me, is the most difficult leg. It's hard to really separate a lot of these horses and know where to go. I know that I want to use Price Talk as an A. I just think he's a price horse that you can get into the mix, and if he wins the Red Smith, this sequence is going to pay. I'm not against Surf the King. I'd use him. I'd probably downgrade Channel Cat to a B. I mentioned Corelli. I think he's more of a B or C type as well. He's not really an A for me. And then the others would probably be all C types. Anybody else that Craig or I mentioned in that race. And then the final one, again, it's difficult, kind of like the first leg. I'm not totally against Catching Cupid, but I know that I do want to beat him in this race to make the sequence pay better. So I would press that number 6, Always Charming, that first-time starter. Just really intrigued by that horse. And a first-time starter, even if he gets bet in the last race, like say he gets bet down from an 8-1 morning line to something like 5-1, he's probably going to be a much bigger price in the multi-race sequences, especially a pick 5, because that live money is probably not going to show in these multi-race sequences. So I would try to use him prominently in the last leg. And also the number 7, Unique Unions, that other horse I mentioned, probably is a B or a C type.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think we covered the most. I do want to say I should have known better. You were correct about T Loves a Fight. Sometimes that scroll button goes a little too fast in TimeformUS, and I didn't realize just how many races I had scrolled past. I didn't count them, but it has been a long time since he won, so I'll probably reevaluate that one in either single cost basis or just pass it. The 7 horse, you pretty much covered it. I do like Life is Great. I'm going to use him as an A. Take a chance that speed figure is legit, because if I'm right, I'm going to get paid for it for sure. I will likewise Scuttlebuzz would be the top pick. He'd be an A for me. Kawaii River, maybe a B. And some of the others mentioned as C types. And I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with that ninth race. Most likely, I would probably lean more on the price horses and maybe use Serve the King and Channel Cat is B and C types. B for Serve the King, C is Channel Cat. And then the C race, the 10th race, it's just going to depend on how the rest of the ticket looks, to be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy one to sort out and to come away with a ticket that you feel confident about, but it is one that's worth really looking into and trying to figure it out, because this is definitely one that could pay well if you're able to navigate this difficult labyrinth of a pick 5 sequence. So Craig, hopefully we give out some good ideas and some winners, and we can help people get this one, because I do think it's one that's going to be worthwhile. So that's a look at this pick 5 sequence at Aqueduct on Saturday. Craig and I will of course be back next week to talk about these races, probably the Red Smith in particular, on the TimeformUS Pacecast, and any other races taking place around the country this week. Remember, you can always listen to these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Thanks for tuning in this week, and make sure to catch that TimeformUS Pacecast next week.